meeting on the 27th of January 2022. Before the meeting starts, I'd like to invite the committee member and scrutiny officer to confirm that the officers joining remotely can hear and be heard. Louis, can you confirm officers joining remotely?
Thank you, Chair. Just before that, could we check that we're live? Daryl, are we streaming?
Yeah, it's live.
Thank you very much. Just a quick roll call. Do we have Andrew Hunter in the call?
Yes, here.
And Alex Howard?
Yes, here.
Thank you very much. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Before we start, I'd like to go on record with my sincere thanks for the exceptional way in which my predecessor, Ruth Brown, chaired these meetings during her tenure, and compliment her on her professionalism. I'm sure you'll all join me in wishing her success in her new position as Executive Member for Planning and Vice Leader of the Council. Apologies for absence. Apologies have been received from Councillors Tony Hunter, Ian Moody and John Bishop. Having given due notice, Councillor Michael Muir will be substituting for Councillor Tony Hunter, and Councillor Simon Bloxham will be substituting for Councillor John Bishop. Are there any other apologies? Item 2, minutes from the 2nd of December. I propose we take as read and approve as a true record of proceedings the minutes of the meeting on the 2nd of December 2021. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Mantle.
On the technology. Yes, I'm happy to second.
It's all right, I recognise a hand wave. Are there any comments on the minutes before we vote? No? Therefore, Louis, can we please go to the vote?
Thank you, Chair. That motion is carried.
Notification of any other business? I have none. Chair's announcements. In accordance with council policy, this meeting is being audio recorded as well as filmed. The audio recordings will be available to view on ModGov and the film recording via the NHDC YouTube channel. I remind members to make any declarations of interest before an item. The detailed reminder about this and the speaking rights is set out under Chair's announcements on the agenda. To clarify matters for registered speakers, members of the public have 5 minutes for each group of speakers. That's 5 minutes for objectors and 5 minutes for supporters. This 5-minute time limit also applies to member advocates. We will take a break at 9 p.m. or at a suitable point thereabouts, if required. The public participation tonight, can I confirm any registered speakers are in attendance? Margaret Trinder? Simon Hoskin?
Yes.
Andrew Hills?
Yes.
And I've seen Councillor Steve Jarvis. Right, we move on to item 6. It's 21/02076/FP, land west of Castlefield, Preston, Hertfordshire. Can I ask Simon Ellis to present?
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. I've got a few updates and then I will run through the slides. First of all, if you look at paragraph 4.87, there's a table in there which we tend to put in these reports that sets out section 106 elements and contributions. There's, for some reason, there are 3 that were missing from that table, and I'll just explain what those are. So the first one is £11,118 towards St Martin's Church footpath improvements. The next one is £13,068 towards new surface footpath between Butchers Lane and Chequers Lane. And £5,000 towards improvements and future maintenance of the Chiltern Way footpath, and £10,000 towards a proposed extension of the recreation ground pavilion. Another change, so that those were missing, they'd stay the same. A change to that table, though, I just want to remove fire hydrants contribution and put that in as a condition of the planning permission, should members be minded to grant. So prior to the completion of drainage works, full details of any fire hydrants shall be submitted and approved in writing by the local planning authority in consultation with Herts County Council. The fire hydrant provisions shall be implemented as approved. Next thing, staying on that table, there's been some late revisions to the County Council's contributions, and I'll set those out now. If you look at secondary school contribution, that's gone up significantly to 259,074. Special needs and disabilities has gone up to 25,578. Libraries is 2,219, and youth services 4,596. And the applicant has confirmed on the 25th of January that they can accept those revised contributions in the legal agreement. So those are the updates on section 106 matters. If you look at paragraphs 4.57 to 4.62, that's an analysis of the scheme in relation to heritage assets. And there's a range of heritage assets within the vicinity of the site. And we've just received some formal comments from the council's conservation officer. And he's saying that I consider that there is some harm to the setting of these heritage assets, thus harming their significance, and that this is towards the mid to the lower end of the less than substantial harm continuum, which is identified in the National Planning Policy Framework. Whilst identifying some harm which would normally result in an objection, I acknowledge that this is an allocated site and the density has been reduced when compared with the original submission. So he supports the officer's analysis because you have to balance the harm against the public benefits of the scheme. That's NPPF requirement. Next update is, if you look at paragraph 3.8, it sets out that there would be an update from the lead local flood authority. And we have had an update from the lead local flood authority, and they have withdrawn their objections to the development and recommended 2 conditions. I'm not going to read them all out. The first condition states essentially that the drainage strategy should be carried out in accordance with the approved plans. So they're finally satisfied with the drainage strategy that the applicants provided. And the second condition is very long, but is essentially about much more detailed specifics of that. So requiring detailed engineering drawings. But the latest revision to the drainage strategy is sufficient to overcome the objections from the lead local flood authority, which means that there's no more technical objections to the application. Those 2 additional conditions, plus the additional one I mentioned about fire hydrants, which are taking off the section 106 table. One other slight change I want to make to the recommendation is just to add in a recommendation B, which is that the applicant should agree any necessary extensions to the statutory determination period to enable final completion of the section 106 agreement. Those are the updates, Chair, and I'll now turn to the slides, please. Can we have the next one? That's showing the site location plan from the GIS in Preston with the access off Castle Fields, and you can see the footpath to the south, and I think that's Butchers Lane to the west. Have the next slide, please. This is an extract from the emerging local plan. So you can see in green, that's the category A settlement boundary. And then you can see in brown with a big PR1 on it, that's the site proposed allocation with a dwelling estimate of 21 in the local plan, which is bang on what's being proposed here. Can I have the next slide, please? And this is the landscape master plan. And you can see that the higher density of development is nearer the existing settlement, particularly the more modern housing to the east. And you can see that the periphery is still well maintained, maintaining the rural aspect of the Butchers Lane verge. And also you can see the tree belt to the northwest of the site, and then the open space in the bottom south west corner. Can I have the next slide, please? This is just a bit more detailed, close in on that. And on this one, this is quite useful because you can see the proposed footpath link from within the development to the footpath to the south of the site, footpath 004, which connects to Butchers Lane as well. So you can see how that open space can be integrated with the wider footpath network and the lane to the west. Can I have the next slide, please? This is a quite interesting sort of montage of different house types that you can get in the development with the site plan in the middle. Next one, please. Similar, you can see there's bungalows proposed in this scheme as well. Next one, please. This is a tracking plan to show you the access arrangements within the development, how different size vehicles can move around the scheme safely. Next one, please. And here's some elevations of house types. And flick through those. Next one. And the next. And the next one. These are the bungalows I was mentioning. Next one. And that's the overall site plan. The dwelling mix is discussed in one of the paragraphs in the plan, which in the report rather, and there's quite a range of house types here, including a range of affordable housing proposed. And the officer's report clearly sets out how he considers it to fully address the sort of housing balance and mix that are needed. I'll turn to the photos now then. These are taken from within the site. That's looking from I think that's the bottom south west corner, looking towards the access between those two houses. You can see the gable there and the modern housing, and you can see the hedgerow to the left. That's on the verge. That's the divide between Butchers Lane and the site. You can see the site's relatively flat. Next one, please. Again, that's a close-up of that row of trees there. Next one. Not quite sure where that one's looking. It's looking to some corner of the site, I think. Next one, please. There's the access that would come through those gates and those two modern houses facing onto the access. So that's a close-up of where so you'd sort of continuing from that modern housing there into the new housing estate, a continuum of sort of modern housing form. Next one, please. That's a wider view of that, or a longer view of that access point. You can see that there. Next one, please. I think that's Butchers Lane. Next one, please. And that's looking from within the existing development towards the access between the two houses I mentioned of. This is a photograph taken from Castlefield. Next one then. That's the entrance to Castlefield from the other road. Next one, please. And that's the footpath I mentioned to the south of the site, footpath 004. And I mentioned in the, you can see on the site location, on the site plan, how there would be a footpath linked to that footpath as well from within the development. Next one then. And that's it. Those are my updates, Chair, and those are the photographs. Take any questions. Thank you.
Members, have you any questions for Mr. Ellis? In that case, we'll move on to the registered speakers. Could I invite Margaret Trinder? Just remind you, Margaret, you have 5 minutes.
Yeah. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and councillors. I'm Chairman of Preston Parish Council, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Parish Council, the Neighbourhood Plan Steering Group and the Preston Trust. We have followed the lengthy process of this application since its submission, taking note of the local situation regarding land supply, the emerging local plan, recent appeals, and the planning officer's detailed report covering planning considerations. We realise that all of these have to be taken into account when determining the application, but we would also like the committee to consider the following matters when making its decision. The aspect of this application which most concerns Preston residents is the large number of dwellings and the proposed high density. Representations have made clear that, in their view, it will have a detrimental impact on the village. A reduction in housing numbers by this committee would be welcomed by the local community. We believe that a greater proportion of smaller units are required and that the housing mix should be further improved to reflect local need. The proposal includes 18 larger properties and 3 smaller properties. A better mix would be 13 larger properties and 8 smaller dwellings. As well as going further towards meeting Preston's housing need, these numbers would meet policy HS3 of the emerging local plan. Local knowledge indicates that drainage, water runoff and water pressure are ongoing problems likely to be exacerbated by this development. There have been documented occurrences of sewage flooding inside residents' homes because of the inadequacies of the current infrastructure. The consultation response from Affinity Water advises that they will take steps, but how will this be secured and when will it be implemented? We ask the committee to ensure the local planning authority compels the utility companies to improve these issues or impose a condition for the developer to do so, to avoid emergencies as a result of new dwellings. We do not agree that measures included in these proposals are adequate to meet North Hertfordshire's target of 0 carbon emissions by 2030, only 8 years from now. Further measures must be added so that the development becomes low carbon or carbon neutral. We ask that the following suggestions become conditions if planning consent is granted this evening. Not to use grey water for flushing toilets is short-sighted. While the measures included so far will reduce demand on the mains water supply, if grey water was used to flush toilets, the demand on mains water would be further reduced. Water is a scarce resource, and we all know that North Hertfordshire has low annual rainfall, which is likely to be exacerbated by climate change. Affinity has increased pumping from the River Mimram this winter, which has now dried up west of Whitwell. New housing potentially makes this problem worse. We disagree that solar panels are not required. While accepting that heat pumps will heat the homes efficiently and provide hot water, solar panels could provide electricity for some of the other requirements within the homes and would go further towards reducing carbon emissions. The proposed houses will be lived in for many years, and although our suggestions will add to the build costs now, they will be a step towards future-proofing the dwellings, and the long-term benefits will be immeasurable. We note that 57% of the site is undeveloped because of the area unsuitable for building. We ask that a condition is put on any consent to ensure that this open space, the soft landscaping and amenity areas remain in perpetuity. We also request that the amendments which were made to soften the dwelling frontages and replace walls with hedges be subject to a similar condition. We are pleased to see a condition for no lighting in
You
the
have
community.
30 seconds left.
In community areas, and we ask that individual household lighting should be restricted to meet the wider village requirements while giving due consideration to the safety of prospective residents. The broadband connections into village homes, which are already at a maximum, need to be increased to cope with the proposed new houses. Please take these comments into account to ensure that this development is appropriate and proportionate for the present and future residents of Preston. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Margaret. Can I now invite Simon Hoskin? Oh, sorry, before I do, apologies, Simon. Has anybody got any questions or clarification for our speaker? No? Over to you then, Simon. Sorry, no, not a member of the planning committee. It's only the planning committee that can ask questions, not the public. Over to you, Simon.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to address the committee. My name is Simon Hoskin, and I'm the agent for the applicant Osprey Homes, an award-winning Hertfordshire-based local house builder. We support your officer's recommendation of approval. The site has been allocated for residential development in your emerging local plan and is referred to as Site PR1. The site also lies within the settlement boundary for the village, within which residential development is supported by policy HD1 of the Preston Parish Neighbourhood Plan. The proposed development will deliver an allocation which is expected to make an important and early contribution to meeting the urgent need for new housing in the district. The emerging local plan is at an advanced stage and close to adoption, and therefore should be afforded significant weight in accordance with paragraph 48 of the NPPF. Osprey Homes has been working closely with North Hertfordshire District Council planning team on this application since February last year, and the design and layout of the proposed development has been carefully considered to ensure that the policy requirements for this site, as set in policy PR1 of the emerging local plan, will be met. Amendments have been made during the course of the application to positively respond to feedback received from officers in the local community. These have included a reduction to the number of proposed dwellings from 23 down to 21, which is in line with the dwelling estimate referred to within policy PR1. Amendments have also been made to the elevational treatments of the buildings and associated landscaping, and to remove lighting following the feedback from the Parish Council. The layout respects the surrounding built form and responds positively to the site's context. The proposal will result in the creation of a high quality environment that will allow the retention of existing trees and hedging that will be complemented with extensive soft landscaping. The scheme will benefit from sufficient on-site parking provision, in addition to well-designed amenity and open space, and will provide a well-designed mix of dwelling types at a density which is comparable to its surroundings and in keeping with its village location. A mix of terraced, semi-detached and detached two-storey houses as well as bungalows are proposed, which is not inconsistent with the surrounding pattern, scale and form of development, and which will form an extension to the existing development within Castlefield. The new development will allow a new mixed community to develop, helping to enhance the vitality of the existing rural community in the village in accordance with the objectives of paragraph 78 of the NPPF. The development provides 57 parking spaces, which meets both the emerging local plan and neighbourhood plan standards. We have also worked closely with the council and county council officers in preparing a Section 106 agreement, and this will provide financial contributions towards local facilities and infrastructure, including contributions towards upgrading public footpaths in the area, playground improvements at the nearby Church Meadow play area and recreation grounds, and to fund an extension to the pavilion, and the installation of new signage within the nearby Wainwood SSSI, Site of Special Scientific Interest. The Section 106 agreement also provides for 7 of the new dwellings to be affordable housing, one of which will be M43 compliant to a wheelchair user standard for disabled residents. The affordable housing mix has also been agreed following detailed discussions with officers, including your housing officer. As set out within the officer's report to committee, North Herts District Council was not able to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, and as such, the tilted balance is engaged. This requires permission to be granted unless any adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and clearly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits in accordance with paragraph 11 of the NPPF. In this case, it is our view that there are no adverse impacts that would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits, and consequently permission should be granted. So for these reasons, Chair, we fully support your officer's recommendation of approval. Thank you for allowing me to address the committee.
Thank you very much. Have members got any questions, clarification for the speaker? No. Can I ask Simon Ellis to respond to any points that have been raised?
Just to say, there's a few ideas there for conditions if that comes up in the debate. But this is a policy compliant scheme, and also some other stipulations suggested by the parish council. Members all know this is a it's a transactional arrangement, isn't it? You either grant planning permission or refuse planning permission. You can't manipulate the scheme once it gets to this stage. So it's acceptable. It's clearly an acceptable scheme. It complies with the dwelling estimate in the MPPF. The density has been carefully designed. It's well wooded around the site, and it's a good layout, in my opinion. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Ellis. Right, before we go to debate, I just wanted to check that all members have received emails from the Community Communications Partnership. Yeah. And also an email from Professor Theda Wynne. Right, so that help you make your decisions. Right, can we go to debate then? Councillor David Levitt.
Thank you. As nobody else is indicating to speak, I'll kick off. I've listened to what the speakers have said there, particularly the bit about the housing mix. It does actually seem quite reasonable to me. There's a total of 21 dwellings. 15 of those are 3, 2 or single bedroomed ones. And out of the affordable ones, all 7 fall into that category. To me, the mix seems perfectly reasonable. The density doesn't seem overly onerous. And I can't see any other real issues there at all. So, Chair, I'll move the recommendation. We grant.
Anybody want to speak? Councillor Bloxham.
I just want to ask really the one point that was talked about flooding in the area.
That's it. Thank you. Sorry. The information that was brought to us from the parish council was quite good, I thought, and well presented. I was a bit concerned about the flooding issue that was talked about. Is there any more information on that? Because I took it from the information that we've got and from what you were saying that this seems to have not be an issue if you talk to the water people. But obviously it's a bit of a issue for residents.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. At the beginning of the update, Councillor Bloxham, I updated the position from the Lead Local Flood Authority, and they've looked at 2 iterations, I think, of a drainage strategy, and their standards are very exacting because they're responsible for surface water flooding and making sure that schemes don't add to that and contribute to that. So if the Lead Local Flood Authority are now happy with the drainage strategy, and also not only that, but requiring detailed engineering drawings and specification even more than what's been shown in a condition, then I think that satisfies that particular aspect. And not only that, but you've got the legal agreement that would be signed with the council about a maintenance of open space and the subsequent drainage to make sure that it still performs in the future. And the standards are very high now in terms of looking at climate change mitigation and surface water. So I think it's a technical aspect, and I can understand local concerns because if you get flood risk in areas, it's quite devastating. But I think that the way the system works now is developments are built to a very high standard to make sure that surface water drainage is not a problem in the future in relation to the developments.
Councillor Tom Tyson.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree also that the parish council have made some good points, and I'd like to pick up on a couple of those in a moment. I would say that unlike Councillor Levitt, I find that the density of the housing in that development to be, looking at the site plan, to be, somewhat on the high side. And I understand from Mr. Ellis that that's not something that we can negotiate here. And I don't think, unfortunately, that's something that would lead me to not want to approve the development as a whole. But I do take the points there that the density is, I would say, at the upper end of what is acceptable, and does give us a somewhat suburban feel to the development there in what I think is an incompatible way with the feel of the village as a whole. To go back to what we've just heard from the parish council and from Mr. Ellis, is there a way that we can introduce conditions here regarding the recycling of grey water and the use of solar panels?
Mr. Ellis?
Chair. I mean, what you could do is, I don't think you could be specific, but you could ask for a package of measures to ensure efficient use of water as a condition. And then that leaves scope for flexibility about how that's actually done and what specification would be required. And then on solar panels, I think we looked at this once before, didn't we? You need a feasibility study rather than there shall be solar panels, because they're not always the right solution, are they? And if you look at some of the roof forms of this development, I think solar panels might be quite tricky in certain locations. But you could look at a feasibility study for solar panels, and then the result of the feasibility study, solar panels in feasible locations, something along those lines. And that would address some of those issues that the parish council raised. You could probably add those two conditions, and I don't think they would be overly onerous, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any more? Okay, well, I've had a proposer from Councillor Levitt. We've suddenly got a rush. Now, I don't know whether the rush is to second it or to speak. So we've got Michael Muir, Morgan Derbyshire, Terry Tyler and Mike Hewson. Are you wishing to speak or second?
Just to say, I will second it with those two extra conditions on for usage of water and solar panels where applicable.
Thank you, Michael.
I thought we had to have a proposer and a second of these conditions before we can do that. Is that true?
No.
Chair, if it helps, I'm happy to put those in with my original proposal. So,
right, thank you, Terry.
Good conditions.
Okay. Right, as I say, we've had a proposer and Councillor Muir seconding.
Two new conditions.
Yes, with the conditions to be added that we look at the viability of solar panels and also a better use of water. Is that all right, Mr. Ellis?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was suggesting, Chair. And if that's what members support, we'll draft those up.
Right, thank you. Therefore, can we go to the vote, please? Over to you, Louis.
Chair, that motion has carried.
Thank you. If we move on to item 7 now, 21/00354/FP, land to the rear of 23 Conquest Close, Hitchin. And can I ask Andrew Hunter to present, please?
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me first of all?
Yes, that's fine, Andrew.
Right. Okay, so I have the following updates. We received a representation earlier today from 19 Conquest Close, who asks to explain to the committee the reason that only one of the issues raised, that of access by the fire service, has been further investigated, and a submission by the fire service has now been accepted as addressing the issue. And other points raised by that resident were that no evidence that any of the other issues raised by highways have been adequately addressed. The access road has not become acceptable since the February 2021 highways response, and the issues relating to the suitability of the access road remain. And my response to that representation is that the highways officer provided comments stating that the recommendation for refusal would not be withdrawn until further clarification has been received from the fire service that the layout is acceptable. The fire service has, however, commented on fire safety in 3.12 of my report, but they have not said the layout is unacceptable, and they have not objected. In my view, fire safety is considered acceptable as there is no objection from the fire service, which means, in my opinion, that the objection from the highways officer is effectively withdrawn. But I can appreciate, however, that we've not been able to have that in writing. I've not been able to get a response, an updated response from highways that formally confirmed they have no objections in response to the comments from the fire service. And I'll so the recommendation from officers is that it's recommended to resolve to grant approval, subject to final confirmation from the highway authority that there are no objections in relation to the fire service view, and that they state they do not wish to restrict the grant of permission. I'll come back to that a bit later on. So if I can now go to the slides, please. Okay, so this is, it's only showing half of that map for some reason. But the site is on the middle of roughly the middle of the top half of that page, which is on the northeast side of Conquest Close, and also between dwellings on Stevenage Road and the car park of the Orange Tree Pub. So the larger eastern area is wooded, contains young to mature trees, 2 small single-storey buildings and other vegetation, and ground levels fall to the south and the east. There is a vehicular access drive to the site from Conquest Close, which also provides access to garages and parking areas to some dwellings in Conquest Close and Stevenage Road. And the wider area has a residential character with 2-storey dwellings in most directions. And if we can now go on to the plans. So this is the site location plan. Then to the site plans. That's one existing site plan, and on to the next one. This is another site plan giving more details of trees and levels. And then if we go on to the next site plan, this is the proposed site plan, which shows the erection of the proposed 2 detached bungalows with pitched roofs, and each of and the dwellings would have 2 and 3 bedrooms, and it also shows the vehicular access to the northwest, and a pedestrian access to the side of number 23 Conquest Close to the further south. And if we go to the next plan, this is the plot 1 dwelling, and the next plan is the plot 2 dwelling. The next plan shows cross sections and ground levels. See the ground falling towards Stevenage Road. The next plan shows proposed boundary treatments of walls and fences. The next plans show this is the overall landscaping, and the plan after this is planting details. Then the next plan shows refuse collection arrangements, and then if we move on to the photos, so this is looking between 23 and 25 Conquest Close towards the site. The next photo is the access drive entrance. The next photo is on from the access drive near 1 Conquest Close. The next photo is now looking towards the corner of the access drive. The next photo is looking over a garage on the access drive towards trees that are in the site and nearby. The next photo is this shows garages at the back of some Conquest Close dwellings with entrances onto the access drive, and the entrance to the larger part of the site is at the back. The next photo is nearer that same entrance, and the next photo is facing into the site from that same entrance. And photo number 9. This is looking north towards the site from the Orange Tree car park, which is to the south. And photo number 10. This is, as per the last photo, looking from the Orange Tree pub car park, with the house on the left is in Foster Drive. And photo 11, again from the pub car park, and that is number 92 Stevenage Road on the right. And next photo, this is looking towards the location of the plot 1 dwelling from the rear gardens of Stevenage Road dwellings. And number 13 is looking towards the location of the plot 2 dwelling. And the next photo is another viewpoint in that direction. And the next photo is from inside the site. So on the left and in the middle you can make out some of the Stevenage Road dwellings. And number 16, this is it again in the site, which is looking further west and south. And the last photo is this is again in the site, looking south and further west again. So, as stated earlier, the recommendation is to grant, which is to resolve to grant approval, subject to final confirmation from the Highway Authority that there is no fire risk and that they can grant approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Have any members got any questions of Andrew? Councillor Ian Mantle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Looking at the detailed plans of the two proposed dwellings, I didn't identify where the storage space was for bicycles and mobility scooters and things like that. Could you clarify, please?
Could you clarify that, please, Andrew?
Yes, I mean, they would be able to be stored internally, and there would also, the development also includes hard surfacing around the dwellings, and also a small outbuilding in the rear garden where those items could be stored.
Are you happy with that, Ian? Councillor David Levitt.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Andrew. Just for clarification, Herts County Highways have not withdrawn their recommendation for refusal at the moment, have they? And I've got a second question after that, but that's one. The second bit is refuse collection arrangements. There was a very quick skip over a slide for that. There doesn't appear to be anything in the report about the refuse collection arrangements. Could we have a look at that slide again, please, to just see what they are? Okay, so if I'm looking at right, the refuse collection points by the houses. Is that correct?
I'll jump in there. That's the landscaping sort of kind of master plan, if you will. That's a different, but there's a different refuse plan. But essentially, the refuse collection arrangements are that just north of the back garden of 23 Conquest Close, there is a bin storage area, which will allow bins from both houses to be kept and then moved down the pathway that's proposed to the side of number 23, so that they can be left out on Conquest Close on the various collection days. And I should say that there haven't been objections to this from the council's waste officer.
No, thank you. It clarifies that. I was a little bit concerned that it was going to be collected from outside the houses and the bin lorry would never get up that little track. But if they're going from Conquest Close, then I'm happy with that. It's just the thing about the highways objection.
Yes, to go back to that, they haven't. The highways departments haven't withdrawn or changed their present objection. No.
Councillor Tom Tyson.
Actually, I think this was exactly the same question. I really didn't understand the part about the highways objection. I thought that Mr. Hunter was arguing that they had changed their position on that, but it appears they haven't. So that seems to be the answer to my question.
No, I would agree with you, Tom. Councillor Val Bryant.
Thank you. It's actually carries on from the points everybody else has been making. What's been really good was to actually see a photograph with the bins out on Conquest Close at the moment. And then to imagine what the extra bins where they will go. Because from what I could see when I went to Conquest Close, the part that juts out in front of 25, that is also used for everybody else's bins as well. There is very, very little space there. Do we have any photographs with bins or with vehicles in place in Conquest Close?
Can you answer that at all, Andrew?
On the second photo showing where the entrance to the access driveway is, you can see a few bins on just on the right there, but I don't have any other photos of the street or bins, I'm afraid.
If I may come back, please, Chair. That is the other entrance, not the one I was talking about. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Michael Muir.
Oh, thank you, Chair. From the photographs, the access road that goes behind number 30 up to number 50, then it bears right. Is that all going to be resurfaced? I couldn't see anything on that because it's really tatty, that roadway, if we call it a roadway at the moment.
Andrew, are you aware of any work that's going to take place on the access road?
Yes, the proposal does include the intention to upgrade and resurface that access track. The applicant hasn't provided all of the details of exactly what that entails, and so condition number 8 is recommended to basically ask for those details to be submitted before the commencement of that part of the development, so that they can be approved before such work is carried out.
Councillor Mike Hewson.
Thank you, Chair. I was wondering if the author, I think this is a follow-up question. Maybe we're all thinking the same thing. So that is the access. What we're looking at now will be the access road for all the lorries and materials that will be coming onto site. And there's a condition being put in to make sure that's resurfaced and looks not nicer. But is the condition intended to be enforced prior to commencement of the main development?
That condition only relates to the upgrading of the access drive, not of the development in the largest part of the site. No.
Sorry, can you clarify that, Andrew?
Yeah, the details are only required to be provided before the commencement of the works to the access drive itself.
We could maybe talk about this during the debate, possibly.
Right. Are there any more questions for Andrew Hunter? In the absence of any more questions, thank you, Andrew. Can we therefore go to debate, members? Mhm. Cool. Thank you. Get my Andrews mixed up. We do have a registered speaker. Good evening, Andrew Hills. Welcome, Andrew. I nearly missed you out. Do apologise
You're
for
up on
that.
it if you had.
Yeah. You've got 5 minutes, Andrew.
Okay, can you hear me okay, everybody?
Yes, fine.
Great. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Andrew Hills. I'm owner and resident of 13 Conquest Close and a practicing architect. I'm representing the residents group of Conquest Close and Stevenage Road, which consists of over 30 neighbouring properties, all of whom are concerned about the proposed development and wish to object. Our main concern relates to the site's proposed access. Earlier this week, I emailed a photographic study of the laneway to committee members, and I hope some of you had a chance to review the images and comments provided. The proposal seeks to use an existing 95-metre long private laneway leading off Conquest Close as the sole means of vehicular access to 3 proposed dwellings. It should be noted that the majority of that access laneway is not owned by the site or the developer. The laneway is an extremely narrow and poorly maintained dirt track which provides access to the rear garages and properties and gardens of Stevenage Road and Conquest Close. It was constructed in the 1930s, not designed with vehicles in mind, and is now likely used for domestic vehicles movements. Traversing the laneway in either forward or reverse gear is challenging even for the most seasoned resident. Whilst we would recommend or welcome improvements to the laneway surface associated to the development, in our view, the laneway would remain inadequate as the sole vehicular access to the dwellings. The laneway is extremely narrow, only 2.6 to 2.7 metres wide for the first 45 metres. The laneway then proceeds around a tight blind bend, narrowed by bin storage and neighbouring garages, and widens slightly for the final 50 metres. The proposals fail to comply with Manual for Streets guidance regarding forward visibility at the entrance, exit and corner, even when vehicles are travelling at only 10 miles per hour. There is not sufficient space for supermarket delivery vehicles, removal vans, larger 18-ton delivery trucks, or construction vehicles to traverse the laneway in a single direction, let alone adequate passing space for vehicles should they meet one another. We ask the committee to question how the dwellings can be constructed and deemed functional throughout their life without the ability to accommodate such vehicles. Whilst the applicant appears to have provided swept path analysis drawings demonstrating the smaller vehicles could traverse the laneway, the drawings provided are not representative of reality. They do not appear to have been drawn using a measured survey and instead rely upon a generic land registry map, which are unsuitable for use at this scale. For example, the drawing shows the laneway's narrowest point measuring approximately 3.2, a discrepancy of over half a metre. The drawings do not consider the extent of garage door swings, surface levels, bin storage, hedgerows, brick walls, boundary fences and parked vehicles along the laneway, nor on Conquest Close itself. Were these to be plotted on the applicant's drawing, it would quickly become clear that the laneway is unsuitable as a primary and only means of access. Our concerns are supported by the NHDC Highways Officer, whom has recommended the proposals are refused. I quote, "The applicant has not demonstrated that the proposed road layout serving the development is adequate for emergency and delivery vehicles such as fire appliances, ambulances and supermarket deliveries. The development, if permitted, would therefore be to the detriment of public and highway safety. This would be prejudicial to the general provisions of highway safety and convenience and contrary to the National Planning Framework, Manual for Streets, Herts County Council Local Transport Plan, and not in accordance with Roads in Herts Highways Design Guide." End quote. These concerns are also supported by the local watch commander for the fire service, who indicated the development is not acceptable from the fire service point of view, even if fire engineered solutions were to be introduced to assist firefighters. It should also be noted that previous proposals for just a single dwelling on the site led to a similar response for the NHDC Highways Officer in 2013. Residents are also concerned about noise and dust impacting their ability to enjoy their residences and gardens during construction. The laneway passes the rear gardens of 26 dwellings, with the site itself surrounded by 22 further dwellings. All of these properties would be affected by movements associated with the construction work. As previously mentioned, the laneway provides off-street parking for many residents on Stevenage Road and Conquest Close. We're concerned that construction traffic and work to the laneway would restrict residents' parking in the laneway itself, with Stevenage Road and Conquest Close Already above capacity, this would likely lead to overflowing vehicles onto the already congested A602. We therefore support the Environmental Health Officer's recommendation that a construction management plan should be required if the proposals were to be approved. In terms of the buildings themselves, the dwelling sits within 18 metres of neighbouring dwellings on Stevenage Road. The plot also sits significantly above Stevenage Road properties. Whilst only single-storey dwellings, the finished floor levels of the dwellings appear to allow a direct line of sight over the boundary fencing into bedrooms and gardens of Stevenage Road dwellings, significantly impacting the privacy. Given the development's planning history, should approval be given, Stevenage Road residents would request that any permitted development rights are revoked to prevent additional stories being added to the dwellings without the oversight of planners. Previous schemes for two-storey and chalet-type dwellings have already been refused due to overlooking and development. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I was going to stop you, but you were on such a roll. Have anybody got any questions of Andrew for clarification? Yes, Mike Hewson.
Thank you, Chair. Who does own the lane?
It's a slightly odd arrangement, but it's divided into many portions between effectively about 10 or 15 dwellings. So every terraced house on Conquest Close owns a portion. I own the width of my property right to the boundary. The next house owns the next bit, and so on and so on. So there's at least 15 properties that have ownership of those pieces of laneway.
Is the laneway adopted?
I'm only obliged to allow a maximum 8 feet of space for anyone to pass. At the moment, it's a little bit more than that, but there is nothing to stop any resident who owns that laneway narrowing their portion at any time. We don't have any, the developer has made no agreement with us to the contrary, and he would have no right to stop us doing that. He has no right to stop us parking outside our garages, all of those things that would, again, narrow the laneway and even further restrict access.
Thank you, Andrew. Can we go to debate then, please, members? I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of mention about this lane. Councillor Ian Mantle.
Yeah. In fact, I was going to go fundamentally object to the whole concept. I think it is shoehorning inappropriate development into an inappropriate site, as is proved fundamentally by the inability to get decent access to it. I cannot think how they expect things like delivery lorries, builders lorries, when they're actually building anything, to get in. But even more than that, it's just not a building plot. It's a piece of open land which happens to be between houses, quite inappropriate for building on. I don't know how we ever gave it permission in 2014. And I'm very glad that lapsed without being implemented. But I think we should not be allowing this kind of development. The question I asked earlier, with no disrespect, but we didn't get an answer to it. It appears that we're not designing these houses to a reasonable size and a reasonable standard. But that doesn't really surprise me, because I don't think it's a sort of site you can design reasonable housing on anyway. And as for the access, well, I think enough has been said.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor David Levitt.
Thank you, Chair. I think I agree quite a lot with what Councillor Mantle said there, but I specifically want to pick up on the Hertfordshire County Highways point and the fire brigade point. I've been doing this planning committee and other bits since 2006 when I was first elected. I have never seen a comment from the fire service like that before. We've actually got somebody in this room tonight who I know is a ex-fire officer, fireman or fire bobby, whatever. But I'd be interested to hear their comments. I've never seen a comment like that before. Whilst the Hertfordshire Fire and Rescue Service itself doesn't object as such. It raises a number of concerns about the dry riser, about the length of it, particularly about the access road and it's hampering its access. Finishes the practicalities need to be carried an excessive distance. Now, the Highways recommends that permission refused for the following reasons. I have now received further clarification below on the above proposed development. I cannot confirm the details on the amended application is acceptable and would not be withdrawing the recommendation of refusal based on fire attendance until further clarifications being received from the fire service that the layout is acceptable. Now, I think it's quite clear from the fire service's comment, it's not acceptable as it stands. I'd be interested to know what it says, what's meant by where it says clarification below, and it doesn't go any further than that, because there seems to be a little bit missing there. But wasn't me. It's I have grave concerns that that we get a comment from the Fire and Rescue Service like this, and the Highways Authority back it up. Now, we heard the lane has limited access, and it's not that. Now, I'd just like to refer everybody, the officers as well, and members to the NPPF, section 12, achieving well-designed places, and in particular paragraph 130A and FA says, planning policies and decisions should ensure that developments will function well and add to the overall quality area, not just for the short term, but over the lifetime of the development. And F goes on to say, create places that are safe, inclusive and accessible, and which promote health and well-being with high standard of amenity for existing and future users. I think that this application misses every single point on that. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Michael Muir.
Thank you, Chair. David Levitt has said what I was going to say on 4.3.22, so no need to say what I was going to say. I've listened to the speaker, and the houses all own a bit of that road. Surely, if they all own a bit of that access, how can the developer use that road without their permission? I think I've heard enough to suggest that we refuse this application.
Watson.
Thank you. I obviously wasn't going to say anything about fire service access or anything like that. I wouldn't begin to try and comment on that. Oh, but yes, I probably would. Yeah, it's not ideal. The idea of dry rises does work. It's used in a few developments. I can think of a couple now. If you go just across the border to Fairfield Park, the old hospital there has got dry rises on there. If you go just up the road in Works Road, there's a development there, and the reason why you use these rises is because you cannot get a fire appliance close enough to provide enough hose lengths to actually get to fight a fire. So actually even just considering using a dry rising main or something like that, it just makes people concerned, or would certainly make me concerned. But I think I want to go back to what the speaker said about the access here and size of vehicles and things of that nature. It would be great at the start, and you see it quite often in planning where it's, oh yes, well we'd use this, and we'd use much more local transport, and people in the community will all work together to move bins out of the way and move them to. And at the end of the day, it just doesn't happen, and I cannot see this arrangement working to anybody's. I don't know what the word would be, but anybody's happiness at the end of the day. Thank you.
Councillor Val Bryant.
Thank you. This also follows up what's been said, but I'd like to concentrate on Conquest Close itself. And I don't take offence to people in Conquest Close, but if you think about cul-de-sacs, usually they're like frying pans with a handle and a big circle. And Conquest Close is a bit like a spoon with a bend in it. And 23 is at where the spoon starts. So it's a critical point. And there's a very fine balance, I think, at any point of day at night in Conquest Close as to whether you're going to actually be able to get up and out again. And to turn round, you turn round outside number 23 and number 25, if you can. And if there's more traffic, all the cars that we saw on the photographs by the intended entrance, if they're moved, then there's nowhere for those cars to go apart from onto the Stevenage Road. So I just want to emphasize the very fine balance. Normally, never mind worrying about fire engines and dust carts and Sainsbury's vans and so on, I don't think Conquest Close could take anything else in terms of traffic. Thank you.
Right, as there's nobody else wants to speak, we have had a proposer that we refuse this. Have we got a proposer that we accept it? Therefore, yeah. Therefore, I need a seconder before this can go to vote. Yes, Mr. Ellis.
Chair, I was just going to, hearing the debate and the fact that you didn't get anyone proposing to grant, I'm just wondering whether or not you could think about a reason for refusal. I'm just picking up some of the elements of the debate, and I'm just going to check. What I think we could do is, if you look at the report, it refers to the earlier refusal reason on history, paragraph 1.1. What I think you could do is you could expand that first reason for refusal. I think you need to be very careful of going down into specific highway safety reasons for refusal, but I think you can have a general one. So what I'm suggesting is the proposal, by reason of the design and siting of the dwellings and ancillary development on this cramped and poorly accessed site, would be harmful to the character and appearance of the locality. Moreover, the inadequate access arrangements do not appear to enable the safe access of delivery and service vehicles. Delivery, you could even add emergency, couldn't you? Emergency and service vehicles to the site, to the detriment of highway safety and amenity. The proposal therefore fails to accord with policies 57 of the district local plan and policies SP1, SP3 and D1 and D3 of the emerging local plan, and then we'll get the updated section of the MPPF that Councillor Levitt was referring to, which I assume is still section 12, isn't it? Yeah. So that remains as the same. And then if you have that reason for refusal, then you don't need to wait for clarification from the Highway Authority, because if their objections maintained, they can feed into that reason for refusal should there be an appeal. However, if they withdraw their objection, or if they don't contest the appeal, there's enough scope in there that your reason for refusal is not specific about the particular elements, particularly if you use the phrase does not appear to show, so that you could, do you see what I'm saying? So I think it gives you a broad enough scope as a reason for refusal. It covers a multitude of issues without being too specific, but making some general points which are fairly obvious from the scheme and members' feelings of the layout.
Is that exactly what you meant, Councillor Muir?
They were my thoughts.
Councillor Mike Hewson.
In that case, I'm happy to second.
Right, can we go to the vote, please, Louis? Now, let me get this right, so we don't get this wrong again. If we vote yes, we're voting against it, all right? Okay, everybody happy? Hmm? With, yes. You got it?
Chair, that motion is carried.
That was very unanimous. Right, item 8. How are we time-wise? I think we'll press on. Yeah. Item 8, 21/2/112/OP, Daisy Barn, Treacle Lane, Rushton, Buntingford, Hertfordshire. Alex Howard to present.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, thank you, Alex.
Amazing, thank you. Good evening, members. Thank you, Chair. Some updates for you. I'd like to first apologise for an error in my officer report. I've left out the extension to the stat date. It has been agreed as the 31st of January 2022. So that's just that one there. Following this application being called into committee, I received a response from Rushton and Wallington Parish Council on the 21st of January. They basically reiterated all of the things they said in their initial objection, adding a point about the application being also contrary to a previous decision at Southern Green House in 2018. Another update for you. I received an email from Councillor Tyson yesterday. The question was regarding the principle of development on this site in comparison to another site in Hinksworth. I have responded directly to Councillor Tyson as per the advice from my colleagues. And before I get into the presentation, I would just like to take this opportunity to remind members that this application is an outline application, so we can only consider the principle of development in this instance. So if we can go to the slides, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is the application site. It is located on the southeast end of Treacle Lane in Rushton. It's between the host dwelling Daisy Barn, a neighbouring property Field Cottage, and fields to the southeast and southwest. All of the site is within the rural area beyond the green belt. Next slide, please. So this is a view of the southeastern boundary of the site. The site in question is to the right of that boundary and the open fields are to the left. Next slide, please. This is another view of that southeastern boundary I just showed, taken from the road in front of Field Cottage. Next slide, please. This is a view of the site from Treacle Lane, a little bit further back from that previous photo looking south. You will see in the fore part of that photo the area that is currently used as a turning circle for refuse and emergency vehicles that access this area. This turning circle is proposed to be retained via condition should the committee resolve to approve. Next slide, please. This is another view of that site frontage. You can see the host property Daisy Barn on the right there. Next slide, please. This is another view of the site's frontage. Again, you can see Daisy Barn in the back right there. Next slide, please. This is another view of the site frontage with Daisy Barn again. Next slide, please. And this is another view of the site from further down Treacle Lane, more in front of Daisy Barn. Next slide, please. This is a view from the rear garden of Daisy Barn looking south. Next slide, please. This is another view from the rear garden of Daisy Barn. You can see the southeast boundary that I showed in the initial photos in the background. Next slide, please. Again, this is another view from the rear garden of Daisy Barn looking south. Again, that southeast boundary is there. Next slide, please. This is a view of the site looking north towards the site's proposed frontage. You can see Daisy Barn on the left of this photo, as well as Field Cottage in the background. Next slide, please. This is another view of the site from the garden, or I say, sorry, the site even, looking north towards Daisy Barn. Next slide, please. This is another view of the site looking north towards the proposed frontage. Again, you can see Field Cottage in the background. Next slide, please. This is a screenshot from Google Maps Street View taken from the road that leads from Cumberlow Green towards Rushden. In the centre of the photo, you'll be able to make out Daisy Barn and Field Cottage, as well as the other residential properties on Treacle Lane to the left. Next slide, please. So this is the location plan for the site. The proposed site is edged in red, and the host dwelling and its curtilage Daisy Barn is edged in blue. Next slide, please. So this is a topographical plan of the site. The plan, as well as the site photos, show that the application site slopes downwards from northeast to southwest. Next slide, please. This is an indicative site plan of the dwelling proposed on the topographical plan, sorry. Next slide, please. These are indicative elevation drawings for the proposed dwelling. Next slide, please. And these are indicative floor plans for the proposed dwelling. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex. Have any members, any questions of the officer? I believe, Tom.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to follow up the question that I put to Alex yesterday, and as members will know what that was, he very kindly provided me with an explanation this afternoon. So essentially the confusion that was in my mind was that I'd had this report saying basically that because the application site is part of somebody's garden, that it should be looked upon favourably. And yet in another instance, there was a similar case where a paddock was being applied for a change of use to residential garden, and there was concern about that, meaning that it might one day become liable to be built on. And what Mr. Howard was apparently saying was that if this garden was a paddock, not a garden, then we would look unfavourably upon the application. But as it's a garden, we're encouraged to look favourably on it. And I just wondered if he'd like to just take a moment to explain why that is.
That Alex.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you, Councillor Tyson. Yeah, so there is a sort of loose understanding that when land has a residential use existing, there is a sort of favourable principle for development because the use of that land isn't changing, i.e. it's a residential garden land, therefore further residential is loosely acceptable. This is different for, as Councillor Tyson says, if it was a paddock, for example, that's a complete change from paddock land to residential land. It's by no means a blanket rule. It only really works when other considerations sort of fall in line. Councillor Tyson did mention another application in Hinksworth, and without going into too much detail about that other application, the main difference is that, in my opinion, this site reads as a residential garden and has done for a long period of time, whereas the Hinksworth one, although it has permission as a garden now, it reads as the countryside. So there is a little bit of a difference in my opinion, and I would take the view that of that site there isn't a principle for development, but in my view, in this case on Daisy Barn, there is. Thank you.
Councillor Ian Mantle.
Thank you. There's one thing I wasn't clear on from the photographs. You said there was an area that's used by vehicles to turn. Is that on the site or south of the site?
Alex, can you answer that?
I can, yes. So the area that is used for the turning circle is that area of land just south of Daisy Barn. You can see it in, I think, the 4th and 5th photos of my presentation. And the applicant did submit a plan that was conditioned in the original conversion in 2001. and it literally is just a little turning circle that allows for large vehicles to come in, reverse, and then go down Treacle Lane in forward gear. Throughout, it's made abundantly clear in the application supporting documents that the applicant wishes to retain this for emergency vehicles, and refuse vehicles as well.
To just be clear, that means that this turning circle is clear of the site, which is before us as an application for an outline permission. Is that correct? Or is it actually part of the site which will be incorporated into any development on the site if permission is granted?
Sorry, maybe I wasn't clear. So it's within the red line. If you're looking at the location plan, it is within the red line. So therefore, technically, you could argue that it is part of the application. But the applicant is saying that he will retain that element so that if the permission is granted, it won't affect the use of that turning circle by emergency and refuse vehicles. So it is part of the site, but it's not going to be impacted by the development, is what I'm trying to say.
Thank you, Alex. If there's no more questions for the officer, can I invite the member advocate, Councillor Steve Jarvis, to address the committee? Good evening, Steve.
Thank you, Chairman. Clearly, the policy issue here relates to policy SP2 in the emerging local plan, although I think the policy in the saved local plan is essentially similar, in that it suggests that in Rushden it's acceptable to build a single dwelling on a plot within the built core of the village. That doesn't allow that to be, that doesn't extend that core. Now, infilling, I understand the definition of infilling, and this I suspect is what I always thought it was, is it's the act of filling or closing a gap, such as in a row of buildings. And we've seen from the photographs that have been displayed that this is clearly not a question of infilling. It's not filling a gap in a row of buildings. It is an outward extension of the village. And from that point of view, it is clearly not compliant with policy SP2 of the emerging local plan. Now, we've heard it argued that it is acceptable because the land is currently used as a garden, but the policy doesn't relate to the core in general. It relates specifically to the built core. And a garden is not something that's been built. This would be to add an additional building on the edge of the village. Now, the parish council have raised a question about an application that was made elsewhere in the village at Southern Green, where there was a proposal that you could argue was infilling because there were two buildings quite a long way apart either side of it. But the view was that that was not in the core of the village. There was an application that this committee rejected some years ago in Weston on the basis that you couldn't have infilling in the core of a village in a kind of straggly bit on the edge of the village where the dwellings are very far apart. They seem to be much less clear-cut examples than the one we have here, which is clearly an outward expansion of the village. Although you were shown various photographs of the site, you also saw a photograph of the view from Cumberlow Green Road across the valley of the Bean. But the photograph really doesn't do justice to the prominence of this site. Looking across that valley, the edge of Rushden is visible, Field Cottage is visible. There are two thatched properties which are listed buildings further along, and Daisy Barn is visible. Now, Daisy Barn was converted from some agricultural buildings in the early part of this century. And the reason that that happened was because it was an existing agricultural building. But it is probably the most prominent part of the village from the point of view of the view across the Bean Valley. I suspect that's not an issue from a policy point of view. The policy issue is that development in category B villages, unless there's any other reason, and no one I think has advanced any other special grounds in terms of meeting proven local needs or anything of that sort, or relating to the rural economy. This is about whether or not it's an infilling development which does not extend the built core of the village. And I think it's abundantly clear from the photographs you've seen that it would extend the built core of the village. Thanks very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Steve. Alex, would you like to respond to that, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would. On 2 points, really. I do note the point that as per SP2 and CGB1 of the emerging local plan, it does say, as Councillor Tyler says quite rightly, that you can't extend the built core of a village. But I would make one point in that the supporting text under policy SP2 of the emerging local plan says that category B villages will be allowed to accommodate limited infill development that does not expand the built core of the village into surrounding countryside. Now, my view, as I state in my report, is that the southeastern boundary that I showed you in my presentation is the boundary between the village and the countryside. So a dwelling on this site, in my view, would not encroach onto the countryside because it's a garden. It's the very outermost point, in my view. The second point I'd like to raise on this is I think it's important to remember that this is a housing, a new dwelling application. So we do have to consider the tilted balance in paragraph 11 of the NPPF. We have seen in recent appeal decisions that the inspector has acknowledged that there is a clear policy non-compliance and has still, in light of our really poor 5-year land supply, said that it does not significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. Now, I also take this view here that even if we weren't to consider that this is an infill plot, in light of recent appeal decisions and the principle of development, I don't believe, and I've said this in my report, the level of harm does not significantly or demonstrably outweigh the benefits even as per paragraph 11D of the NPPF, which is why, in my view, this is a favourable application.
Thank you, Alex. Right, I'll throw it open to members to debate. Councillor David Levitt.
Thank you, Chair. I do take Councillor Jarvis's point that about it extending the core of the village, because this is right at the end of a dead end lane. And then there's Daisy Barn and what looks like substantial buildings around it, and there's a big swimming pool and things. And then another house opposite this site and a little bit further out. However, the site is very, very clearly designated by quite a hefty hedge around it. If you're looking at this, if I'm looking at the satellite Google Earth picture, which is only a few months old, and it has got quite a significant, well-defined, well-maintained hedge boundary around Daisy Barn and the site, making it one fairly obvious plot. There does appear to be some sort of building in the bit where the development's going to go. So it's a difficult one is on the SP2 thing. And I think where we're going to come unstuck if we did refuse it is on the 5-year housing land supply again. With the putting the stuff into balance, I think we'd probably lose it on that. And this is an outline only. It's a principle of development on that site without everything except our reserves. It's a difficult one, but I really do take Councillor Jarvis's point, and it does look like it's extending the village, but balance in balance, I think we'd be on a loser if we went and refused on those grounds.
Councillor Tom Tyson.
Thank you. Well, I've been there, and I think to describe this as an infilling development is stretching a point. I know that some of these things are matters of interpretation, but to my mind, there is no way that this is infilling anything. It's an addition to the end of the road, and hedge or no hedge, it looks out on open countryside. It'll be plainly visible from the open countryside. And I believe that it does extend the built core of the village as such. So I wouldn't be keen to support it.
Councillor Ian Mantle.
Yes, Chairman. Planning in its current form was introduced to try and stop ribbon development. If this isn't ribbon development, I'm not quite sure what it is.
Anybody else? Do I have a recommendation from anybody then? Councillor Simon Blocks.
Oh, sorry, it was a late press. That was not your fault. You know what? I can understand where we've got policy arrangements, and I hear the arguments for that, pushing that forward and saying that we should have it. But what I can't get over it, I think I support what the officer is saying really, and everything they've said there. At the end of the day, what I'm looking at here is something that is in something that is existing. Infilling, things like that, yeah, okay. But it's on an existing plot of land, a garden. And whether it's extending it or anything like that, that is there. What else are you going to do with it? Use it as a garden or place some needed housing on it?
I'm carefully watching my screen now. Okay. So we're down to, has anybody got any recommendations? Does anybody want to propose anything? Councillor David Levitt.
To move it on, Chairman, I'll propose that we accept the recommendation.
So we have a Councillor Michael Muir.
I will second that proposal.
So we've got a proposal. We do have a seconder. So I think we can go to the vote.
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you, Louis. We move on to item 9. I mean, I don't think it's worth, as this is last, if anybody, unless anybody specifically wants a break. Are you ladies okay? Well, are you men okay? Can I move on then to item 9? 1/02576 FP, Cortlands, Todd's Green, Stevenage. Can I call upon Simon Ellis to present?
Thank you, Chair. I don't have any updates on the report, so we'll go straight to the slides, if we may. That's showing you the existing buildings on site. That's nearly all within Stevenage Borough Council, and there's a very small slither of land around the access that's within North Herts District Council. And this is what's known as a duplicate application, because the regulations require, if there is a development site area that straddles 2 administrative boundaries, you need to provide duplicate planning applications for each authority, although all of the 17 dwellings are in Stevenage Borough Council, and Stevenage Borough Council has granted planning permission for this development and included a Section 106 agreement. So this is just an administrative tidy up really. And the reason it's been presented to Planning Committee is because there don't appear to be any exceptions in the scheme of delegation about sites which straddle boundaries. If it's a residential development more than half a hectare, it has to come to planning committee, even though the vast majority of this site's within Stevenage Borough Council. Can I have the next slide, please? That shows you the layout, of course. As mentioned, it's within Stevenage. And the next one. And it's a colour photo of that. And the next. And that's the access. This is a photograph standing within North Hertfordshire, looking into Stevenage Borough through the gate. That's my updates. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Simon. Have anybody got any questions of Simon? Tom.
Sorry. Can I just ask about the issue with the flood authority? Are they just saying that they don't have information sufficient to be able to make an assessment?
I expect Councillor Tyson that the flood authority were totally confused as to why they were consulted on this application, because they would have given all their analysis in the Stevenage Borough scheme. So they probably didn't realise the regulations and probably wondering why they're looking at an application for what's ostensibly a very small slither of hard surfacing within.
Councillor Michael Muir.
I'd like to move the recommendation.
Councillor Mantle.
Going to second that.
Okay, right. We have a proposer and a seconder, so we can go to the vote.
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you. And back to you, Mr. Ellis, to present the planning appeals report.
No updates on that, Chair. I'll take any questions.
Has anybody got any questions on the planning appeals report? Okay, in that case, the report is for noting. And we've reached the close of the meeting. Thank you, members.